Benson piqued herself upon being less carried away by her love for this child than any one else in the house. She talked severely, and had capital theories, but her severity ended in talk, and her theories would not work. However, she read several books on education, knitting socks for Leonard all the while, and, upon the whole, I think the hands were more usefully employed than the head, and the good honest heart better than either. She looked older than when we first knew her, but it was a ripe, kindly age that was coming over her. Her excellent practical sense, perhaps, made her a more masculine character than her brother. He was often so much perplexed by the problems of life that he let the time for action go by; but she kept him in check by her clear pithy talk, which brought back his wandering thoughts to the duty that lay straight before him, waiting for action. And then he remembered that it was the faithful part to wait patiently upon God, and leave the ends in His hands, who alone knows why evil exists in this world, and why it ever hovers on either side of good. In this respect, Miss Benson had more faith than her brother, or so it seemed; for quick, resolute action in the next step of life was all she required, while he deliberated and trembled, and often did wrong from his very deliberation, when his first instinct would have led him right. But, although decided and prompt as ever, Miss Benson was grown older since the summer afternoon when she dismounted from the coach at the foot of the long Welsh hill that led to Llandew, where her brother awaited her to consult her about Ruth. Though her eye was as bright and straight looking as ever, quick and brave in its glances, her hair had become almost snowy white, and it was on this point she consulted Sally, soon after the date of Leonard's last untruth. The two were arranging Miss Benson's room one morning, when, after dusting the looking glass, she suddenly stopped in her operation, and, after a close inspection of herself, startled Sally by this speech: "Sally, I'm looking a great deal older than I used to." Sally, who was busy dilating on the increased price of flour, considered this remark of Miss Benson's as strangely irrelevant to the matter in hand, and only noticed it by a "To be sure, I suppose we all on us do, but 2 and 4 pence a dozen is too much to make us pay for it." Miss Benson went on with her inspection of herself, and Sally with her economical projects. "Sally," said Miss Benson, "my hair is nearly white. The last time I looked it was only pepper and salt. What must I do?" Why, what would the wench do?" asked Sally contemptuously. "You're never going to be taken in at your time of life by hair dyes and such gimcracks as can only take in young girls whose wisdom teeth are not cut." "And who are not very likely to want them," said Miss Benson quietly. "No, but you see, Sally, it's very awkward having such grey hair, and feeling so young. Do you know, Sally, I've as great a mind for dancing, when I hear a lively tune on the street organs, as ever, and as great a mind to sing when I'm happy to sing in my old way, Sally, you know." "Aye, you had it from a girl," said Sally; "and many a time when the door's been shut, I did not know if it was you in the parlour, or a big bumblebee in the kitchen as was making that drumbling noise. I heard you at it yesterday." "But an old woman with grey hair ought not to have a fancy for dancing or singing," continued Miss Benson. "What nonsense are you talking?" said Sally, roused to indignation. "Calling yourself an old woman, when you're better than 10 years younger than me, and many a girl has grey hair at 25. "But I'm more than 25, Sally. I'm 57 next May." "More shame for ye, then, not to know better than to talk of dyeing your hair. I cannot abide such vanities." "Oh, dear Sally, when will you understand what I mean? I want to know how I'm to keep remembering how old I am, so as to prevent myself from feeling so young. I was quite startled just now to see my hair in the glass, for I can generally tell if my cap is straight by feeling. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll cut off a piece of my grey hair, and plait it together for a marker in my Bible." Miss Benson expected applause for this bright idea, but Sally only made answer, "You'll be taking to painting your cheeks next, now you've once thought of dyeing your hair." So Miss Benson plaited her grey hair in silence and quietness, Leonard holding one end of it while she wove it, and admiring the colour and texture all the time, with a sort of implied dissatisfaction at the auburn colour of his own curls, which was only half comforted away by Miss Benson's information that he lived long enough his hair would be like hers. Mr Benson, who had looked old and frail while he was yet but young, was now stationary as to the date of his appearance; but there was something more of nervous restlessness in his voice and ways than formerly. That was the only change 5 years had brought to him. And as for Sally, she chose to forget age and the passage of years altogether, and had as much work in her, to use her own expression, as she had at 16. Nor was her appearance very explicit as to the flight of time. 50, 60, or 70 she might be, not more than the last nor less than the first, though her usual answer to any circuitous inquiry as to her age was now, what it had been for many years past, "I'm feared I shall never see 30 again." Then, as to the house, it was not one where the sitting rooms are refurnished every 2 or 3 years, not now even, since Ruth came to share their living, a place where, as an article grew shabby or worn, a new one was purchased. The furniture looked poor, and the carpets almost threadbare. But there was such a dainty spirit of cleanliness abroad, such exquisite neatness of repair, and altogether so bright and cheerful a look about the rooms, everything so above board, no shifts to conceal poverty under flimsy ornament, that many a splendid drawing room would give less pleasure to those who could see evidence of character in inanimate things. But whatever poverty there might be in the house, there was full luxuriance in the little square, wall-encircled garden, on 2 sides of which the parlour and kitchen looked. The laburnum tree, which when Ruth came was like a twig stuck into the ground, was now a golden glory in spring, and a pleasant shade in summer. The wild hop that Mr Benson had brought home from one of his country rambles, and planted by the parlour window while Leonard was yet a baby in his mother's arms, was now a garland over the casement, hanging down long tendrils that waved in the breezes, and threw pleasant shadows and traceries, like some old bacchanalian carving, on the parlour walls, at morn or dusky eve. The yellow rose had clambered up to the window of Mr Benson's bedroom, and its blossom-laden branches were supported by a jargonelle pear tree rich in autumnal fruit. But perhaps in Ruth herself there was the greatest external change, for of the change which had gone on in her heart and mind and soul, or if there had been any, neither she or any one around her was conscious. But sometimes Miss Benson did say to Sally, "How very handsome Ruth is grown!" To which Sally made ungracious answer, "Yes, she's well enough. Beauty is deceitful, and favour a snare, and I'm thankful the Lord has spared me from such man traps and spring guns." But even Sally could not help secretly admiring Ruth. If her early brilliancy of colouring was gone, a clear ivory skin as smooth as satin told of complete and perfect health, and was as lovely, if not so striking in effect, as the banished lilies and roses. Her hair had grown darker and deeper in the shadow that lingered in its masses. Her eyes, even if you had guessed that they had shed bitter tears in their day, had a thoughtful, spiritual